Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to look at some rogue picks, which I think could do well in the Scarlet and Violet format. These might be a bit of the under the radar, could do well at leagues, but potentially could have the power to do well at regionals if they hit the right matchups. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the matchup-wise, talk about why I've chosen these style of decks, and I hope you guys enjoy it. If you're new, remember to click that subscribe button and like, and let's jump into the video. So my number 5 pick is Arceus Duraladon. What is dead may never die. This is such a deck which has been the kind of like the staple for how Arceus is paired against in the standard format for a very long time now, and it still survives post-rotation. We do lose some of the healing cards, Big Parasol and the good Duraladon, but it kind of makes up with it. We do have this, you can use the scroll to hit 300 damage to guarantee most big KOs on stuff with the power of double turbo. But with that being said, you are more weaker to Star Requiem on Giratina Vstar. So that's something you've got to consider about. Despite you being 330 HP, big 3 prizer, if you're weak to one of the strongest attacks in the game, which is a tier 1 archetype, that's something to always be considered. But it still plays the normal sort of disruptive sort of path Avery as well as the Judge. But having its Skyscraper ability, limiting being damaged from any Pokemon with special energies on, that's a really good thing, especially slowing down your Lugia plays. You could just have one of these out and play. Lugia doesn't really run path, so you're in a good spot to try and do well. And Mew kind of has to use Max Miracle to go through to attack it. I really like this deck. It's definitely something which is really strong right now in the meta. It did get a second place at our regionals, and at one stage was 5% of the top 8 total share in the City League in Japan. So it is doing well. People are playing it. You could do well definitely at regionals with this list, but being weak to a Giratina's star sort of power, V-Star power, is something you've got to really consider about and kind of worry about, and not having any healing. But I would definitely say you need to understand this matchup if you want to go forward to do well at Deep Run, because people will be playing this deck because it doesn't lose much like Mew, so people will still try and just change it up to kind of not really worry about going into trying out a new archetype. My number 4 spot is Dondozo. I shared this list last week and I love this list so much. So much. With the power of getting most of these cards in the build and battle set, the pre-release things for Scarlet and Violet, it's really, really good. So you're already getting most of these cards by just going to a pre-release, as well as most of the other stuff is pretty cheap. I did make a few tweaks from my last list, cutting one Mesagoza for a double turbo, kind of prioritizing that turn 1 attack, trying to hit for 180 damage. It's really, really strong. Like I've said, this deck really relies off these big hitting damage. The power of Articuno and Dondozo, if you have 2 basic energies attached to it, hitting for 240 damage for a Pokemon which has 160 HP, and if it's knocked out, your opponent takes 1 prize card. It's really, really good. The capability of going 2 for 1 in this deck is so strong. That's why I run 4 copies of Serena to get the discard power with the game Sagurian discard, but also gusting out some of the Lumineons and the support Pokemon. This is where this deck can thrive on. It has loads of item search to try and get the Tatsugiri's out, all of them in your discard pile turn 1. And if that fails, if you go second, you've got Professor Barnett to get the rest of them into the discard. I really love this deck. It can struggle tiny bits because it plays so much item search. If you hit a Bennett or any other item lock, you can just kind of fall flat and go, oh, I can't do much, and hope to try and draw into a professor's research. But you do have the XP share to try and kind of chain the attacks up, and you want to try and chain it as much as possible. As it's a single prizer, your opponent can kind of struggle, but you're not hitting ever no more than 240 damage. And last time I checked, Giratina, Gardevoir, the Regieleki VMAX, Lugia all have over through 280 HP. So definitely something to consider about. You're not getting these big one-hit KOs. That's why I don't think Choice Belt is a good inclusion in this list, because then you go for 270 and that's still not getting these one-hit KOs, even with the Articuno out. So that's something you should always consider about this list. You're never going to get one-hit KOs, and they're always going to get KO back. But it has 160 HP and it's a single prizer. So if a single prizer goes against you and they're not playing like the Raikou V package in Lost Box, they can't one-hit KO you. So that's something which is really, really strong. So you could get one hit KOs on them, and you could potentially go 2 prizes for them and then 1 prize for them. They get 1 prize. So that's always something to consider about. But against other decks like Mew, against Rhydon, against potentially even like, why am I blanking? Lugia, you're not really hitting enough damage. But I love this deck. That's why I've kind of put it a bit above Arceus Duraladon, because of it's just such a fun deck. And I wanted to showcase more of these Scarlet and Violet decks, something to get excited about. This isn't like Luna Rock, which is going to come around and disappear. I think this could do well at definitely the sort of like the if League Cups ever come back, or just a fun deck to play in locals. This is a really good deck to try out, to understand about how to play the deck and understand your resource management, and kind of like knowing when you should play the Clara or the Raihan or Serena to get a game. So number 3 spot is Darkrai Vstar. Again, this is the list I shared last week in my looking ahead video, and I still really, really love this one. I find the Luxray to give the synergy that Darkrai needed. This, if anyone didn't watch that video, this list actually won a City League, like their equivalent of League Cups last week, which I think is really fun to see, that Luxray is basically a really good support Pokemon, getting any 2 trainer cards you might need. This is so good if you go second. If you go first and you start with Luxray, it's good if you're against a deck which can be a bit slower. But if you're against decks like Arceus, against Lost Box, you can really struggle, and you do not want to have this liability on the board. But with that being said, you are still reliant on all of the sort of cards like your Dark Patch, like your Ultra Ball, your Nest Ball, your Cross Switcher to get these KOs on the bench. And kind of your support account is a little bit thinner. Your Zinnia's Resolve does help with getting the dark energies in the discard pile. You do hit relevant weakness like Mew and Gardevoir, but it still takes like 2 to 3 to even 4 turns for you to ramp up to the big, big damage. You've got to make sure you promote the right type of Pokemon, so you're not sacrificing too many energies every single turn. I could potentially add that cards like Clara into this list, or even Raihan, ways for you to guarantee to get energies back, because in this sort of list, as soon as they KO that Moltres V, you're not getting any of your energies back. This list still did win. There's nothing saying like this list is bad, you should change, you should cut and add these cards, but this is a really good starting point to understand about how you could play Darkrai. And this was one of the most hyped about decks going into the new format, and I was definitely in that hype train. It's slowly faded a little bit. That's why it's not higher on the list as a rogue archetype. But definitely because it's hitting 2 of the 5 big decks for weaknesses, it could really make a deep run in a tournament if it gets the right matchups. Again, against Lugia, against decks like Lost Zone Giratina, you can struggle because Lost Zone can, and even Giratina, Lugia, can send you their single prizes to get some KOs, where Darkrai isn't really getting that sort of damage output yet. And you don't really ever want to go 2 for 1 if you're playing against Darkrai. So yeah, I really like this list. I think it's really, really strong, but it can struggle against certain matchups if it's not getting the right KO, because it takes a while to ramp up to the damage output. My number 2 spot, so coming in second place, is Spidops Leafeon. I shared this list on Friday, and I love this deck so, so much. Did do a couple tweaks. I added 2 Raihan in, because if you kind of put all your eggs in one basket on one attacker and then it gets KO'd like your second turn, you have no energies on the field, and you don't want to spend a turn getting a Leafeon V to get the attachment. So that's why I've added the Raihan, to try and get that synergy you need to guarantee to get always the energies cycling and rolling. I think it's really strong. It utilizes the Zoroark package. Not only can it use Spidops if it gets KO'd, or if you discard it to jump back in with Zoroark, but you have Mightyena. So you can get the Mew matchup, which can be a bit of a tricky one, because the Mew has has none special retreat costs. So you have to have 4 Spidops out in play. If you're playing Spidops, that's 90 plus 120. That's only 210 damage, not enough. Or if it's Leafeon, it's 60 times 4, which is 240 damage. You're not getting 1-hit KOs, even if you add Choice Belt to it. So that's why you play the Mightyena, to try and help the Mew matchup as much as possible. But you can trap stuff like the Genesect on, so forcing them to get the switch cards while you set up is really, really strong. It definitely can help really win deck games, especially decks like Lugia and decks like some Arceus decks, or even potentially some Giratina, because you are getting these big, they have big retreat costs already. You have 3 to 4 Spidops out, their retreat cost may be up to 6. So that you can easily get these big 1-hit KOs back. You always have to rely, you are playing as a VMAX. Your opponent will be getting 3 prizes if it's knocked out. And V-Guard does help push it to 340 HP if you're going against Vs. So that's something you should consider about. And even with Spidops, 290, which is really, really high for a 2-prizer. So that's just something you've got to consider about. Your supporter line isn't as focused on like draw engine. You're trying to get these search outs and the disruption to try and like get your Pokemon set up. And because we said goodbye to Evolution Incense, you've got to either flip with Captain Aroma, hope for, I believe it's heads to get an evolved Pokemon, or discard too many valuable resources for Ultra Ball, or rely on support like Jack. So there are like some like iffy sort of cards. That's why we have a 2-2 line of Bibarel to try and get the synergy out and the draw engine as much as possible. And we're not playing the Leafeon Vstar, so you don't get the boss factor there. So we do have Forest Steel Stone to get any card we want. I think this deck is really strong. In decks which have at least 2 to maybe even 3 retreat costs, you can easily get those big one-hit KOs, and they can potentially struggle to get one-hit KOs back. But in decks like Miraidon and Mew, because they have very low to none retreat costs, you could really struggle with it. And you are very reliant on Path with only 2 outs in Mesogozo. So yeah, I really like this one. I've kind of put it second place and above Darkrai because I think it's above it. I think it can do really, really well and hit hard and definitely get some big games. I don't think it could ever get a deep tournament run. I never know. This could be the optimal list. This might be a list that other people might be tweaking, but definitely something you should think about on your radar because there's relatively cheap cards. It's relatively inexpensive to build this list. So definitely something I would test against, understand the matchup, but you can really struggle against Mew and Miraidon because they have nearly no retreat cost. And the number 1 rogue pick, which some people may be surprised I put it here, is in fact Rapid Strike Urshifu. Inteleon VMAX. Yes, I put these 2 here in the number 1 rogue pick. I will be doing in a few days' time a best like competitive decks and kind of talking about the results there. But anyway, I will talk about Rapid Strike Urshifu. This has had a top 8 placement in regionals. It's about 3 to 8% of the always per week the total top 8 placements in Japan's City League. So it is doing well. People are liking this deck, but its 2 glaring thing is its weaknesses. Urshifu is weak to Psychic. And yes, you could play Drapion to try and get the KOs on Mew, but against Gardevoir, you can kind of struggle with it. And not playing your big attacker into these decks like that can be a big, big struggle. With Miraidon, yes, they hit for weakness on Inteleon, but you also hit for weakness for them. But you've got to constantly be switching them from the bench to get the big KO on Miraidon. So that's something you've got to consider about every single time. You're not going to win loads of the big decks there. And Giratina, like I said, Star Requiem still exists and could be a big struggle with this list. But if this gets set up, it is amazing. If you avoid basically 3 of the 4 top decks, you're absolutely fine. It's funny to say that, but like hitting the bench is really, really strong. Teaming it up with Inteleon sniping attack and Medicham Vs like Yoga Loop and even Radiant Alakazam, moving all the damage counters on, you can get like loads and loads of turns. You can get 2 back-to-back turns to get potentially 2 to even 5 prize cards in that sort of turn. Is such a strong effect. Utilizing energy retrieval, so you get these sniping back every turn. And the healing and disruption that Cheryl and Roxanne can bring are really, really strong. And Octillery to get any of the Rapid Strike cards you want. But like I said, it's the number 1 rogue pick because it can't keep up as much with Mew. And if Mew is one of the best decks in post-rotation, relying on 2 cards of Drapion to try and help is never the best sort of situation. And yes, you played a double, so you don't need to rely too much on like, oh no, they lost City that I now scoop because I can't get the KO. So having that 2 is good, and Heavy Ball, especially if it's prized. But I don't know. I really love this lick. I think it's really, really fun. I think it's a definitely good archetype to play. One of the strongest decks, I feel like, in the rogue sort of category, but it does fall flat a little bit to keep up with the big competitive one. Now, there could be players like Tord, who I know love Urshifu, could completely change the style of the list and kind of make it a more optimal one. This is my optimal list, which I've seen so far, and definitely something which I've been enjoying in testing and kind of theorizing about. But if you avoid some of the bad matchups, you could really do well. But that's never a good thing to say about a deck. But the ability of the sniping, the attacking on the bench, the search draw with Octillery, and the potentially a second turn with Medicham V can never be trifled with. So those are my top 5 rogue picks on the deck choices for Scarlet and Violet. Did any of the decks that you thought I would mention make the list? If they didn't, be sure to comment down below and we can discuss where they could face in some other matchups. I'm going to be back on Friday when it's Scarlet and Violet release date with some of the top 5 competitive decks in the new format. Kind of like talking to you about what decks have been doing well in the tournaments, my thoughts and feelings on them, and kind of like how they could shape up in our metagame. So if you're brand new, be sure to like and subscribe and follow me on Twitter. I don't plug it as much, but I just start posting there about when videos are out and kind of like my thought process in some deck profiles and buildings, which I've been doing. So yeah, I will see you on Friday when Scarlet and Violet is legal, which I'm so excited about. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys then. Bye for now.